There's this peculiar thing that happens when someone close to you dies. Not, I'm talking about what happens 3 weeks later when you're standing in line at a coffee shop and the person in front of you is having a minor meltdown because they got oat milk instead of almond milk. And you're watching this unfold, this genuine distress over plant-based liquids, and something inside you has broken. Not in a tragic way, in a way that makes you wonder if you've been living in a different reality this entire time. We talk about death like it's this thing that happens at the end, a punctuation mark, an event you prepare for with estate planning and advance directives. But that's not actually how death works in your life. That's not what death does to you. Death isn't something you encounter once and then it's over. Death is the thing that once you truly see it, rewrites every single moment you thought you understood. Here's what nobody tells you. You can't actually be alive, not really alive, without knowing death, not knowing about it intellectually, like you know the capital of France. I mean knowing it in your bones, in the way your body knows how to breathe. And once you know death that way, you don't get to go back. You don't get to return to the person who cared about the difference between oat milk and almond milk. That person is gone. You killed them by knowing what you now know. And here's the uncomfortable part. The part that makes people look at you strangely at dinner parties. This isn't a tragedy. This is actually what being alive means, but it costs you almost everything you thought life was supposed to be. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And what you see is that most of what you called living was actually an elaborate performance, staged for an audience that doesn't exist, performed by an actor who was never real, in a theater that will burn down no matter how well you play your part. You lose things, tremendous, irreversible things. And that's what I want to talk about. Before I knew death, really knew it, I thought life was about accumulation. Experiences, achievements, relationships, memories, wisdom, possessions. Building something, becoming someone. Creating a story worth telling. But once you know death, you realize life isn't about accumulation at all. It's about subtraction. It's about losing things until only something true remains. What follows is a map of specific losses. 7 things you lose when you truly know death. Not lose in the sense that they're taken from you, but lose in the sense that you can't believe in them anymore. Can't participate in the shared fiction, and each loss changes the texture of your daily experience in ways that are difficult to describe to people still living in the old story. Let me show you what I mean. The first thing you lose, and perhaps the most disorienting, is your functional belief that you have unlimited time. Before you know death, you live as if time is infinite. Not because you're stupid or in denial. You intellectually know you'll die someday. But that knowledge doesn't penetrate. It doesn't change your behavior. You postpone things. You say someday, and eventually, and when I have time. You have entire categories of activities labeled things I'll do when I retire, or things I'll do when the kids are older, or things I'll do when I'm not so busy. You spend Tuesday evenings scrolling through content you don't even enjoy. You stay in conversations that drain you. You endure meetings about meetings. You participate in your own life as if it's a rehearsal for the real thing that starts later. But once you know death, once you've sat with a body that 12 hours ago was a person, or held someone's hand as they took their last breath, or realized with absolute clarity that you too will cease to exist, everything changes. And here's the thing about truly knowing death. It doesn't make you morbid. It makes you allergic to waste. I remember the first time I experienced this shift. It was maybe 3 months after my father died. I was in a meeting at work, one of those meetings where 8 people spend 90 minutes discussing something that could have been an email. And I was sitting there watching my colleagues debate the merits of different font choices for a presentation. And I had this sudden, visceral realization. My father would never be in another meeting. He would never have another Tuesday, never eat another sandwich, never waste another afternoon. He had run out of afternoons permanently, and I was sitting there spending mine on fonts. I walked out, just stood up and left. Not dramatically. I probably mumbled something about not feeling well, but I couldn't stay. It felt like being forced to watch someone burn money while children starved. I don't say this with any sense of superiority, mind you. I understand why the meeting mattered to the people in it. I understand that organizations need structure and decisions need deliberation. But I couldn't participate anymore. The knowing wouldn't let me. This creates problems. People think you've become irresponsible or impulsive. Your partner asks why you're suddenly unwilling to do things you used to tolerate. It's just 2 hours, they say about a social obligation you don't want to attend. And they're right, it is just 2 hours. But you can see those 2 hours. You can see them as a finite, irreplaceable portion of the limited hours you have left. 2 hours that once spent are gone as completely as if they never existed. You start saying no to things, a lot of things you used to say yes to automatically, and people get offended. They think you don't care about them. They think you've changed, become selfish. And you have changed. You've become someone who knows that time is the only thing you actually have, and it's running out. And you can't get more of it, and nobody, not your boss, not your friends, not your family, not society, has any right to it except by your conscious, deliberate choice. But here's what you notice once you start living this way. You're not actually more selfish. You're more present. You're more genuinely available to the things you do choose. Because you're not anymore dividing your attention between what you're doing and what you wish you were doing. You might still go to social obligations, but you're no longer resenting them while fantasizing about escape. You're either there, truly there, or you're not there at all. Once you see that time is actually limited, you can't unsee it. Every moment becomes simultaneously precious and terrifying. Precious because it's irreplaceable, terrifying because it's disappeared. The second thing you lose is your attachment to leaving something permanent behind. Before you know death, you're obsessed with legacy. Maybe not consciously. You're not walking around thinking about your legacy, but it's there in the background, driving everything. You want to create something that lasts. Write something people will read after you're gone. Build something that bears your name. Raise children who will remember you. Make a mark. Leave evidence you existed. The thought of being forgotten is existentially terrifying. You want to matter permanently. You might write a book, start a company, create art, accumulate wealth to pass down. You document everything, photos, videos, journals. You worry about what people will say at your funeral. You imagine biographies. You want your life to have meant something that transcends your temporary existence. This isn't vanity, exactly. It's a defense against annihilation. If something of you persists, then you haven't completely died. That's the logic anyway. But once you know death, once you've really absorbed the fact of absolute ending, something strange happens. The need for permanence drops away. Not because you've become nihilistic or depressed, but because you suddenly see the absurdity of trying to defeat death by leaving traces. And here's the thing about permanence. Nothing is permanent. Nothing. I remember standing in a museum, maybe 2 years after I first knew death the way I'm describing, looking at artifacts from civilizations that were once as convinced of their own importance as we are of ours. Entire empires reduced to pottery shards behind glass. Languages no one can read, gods no one remembers, the names of kings who once commanded armies, reduced to disputed footnotes. And I thought, this is what awaits everything. Every book, every building, every company, every child. The sun will eventually expand and consume the earth. Every trace will be erased. Complete, total erasure. And instead of feeling despair, I felt relief. This enormous pressure I'd been carrying, the pressure to create something lasting, just dissolved. Because why? Why exhaust yourself trying to achieve the impossible? Why poison your present experience with anxiety about a future where you won't exist to care anyway? I don't say this with any sense of superiority, mind you. I understand the drive to create legacy. I still create things. But I'm no longer doing it to defeat death. I'm doing it because I'm alive right now. And creation is what being alive feels like. This loss creates distance between you and most of society. Because most of everything, most of the economy, most of culture, most of what we call ambition, is powered by the terror of impermanence. People don't understand why you're no longer motivated by recognition or status, why you're not devastated when projects fail, why you seem cavalier about achievements that once consumed you. Don't you want to leave something behind? People ask. And the true answer which you learn not to say out loud is, no, not really, not anymore, because I'll be dead, completely dead. As dead as someone who lived 5,000 years ago and left nothing behind. Their oblivion and my oblivion are identical. So why should I torture my living moments in service of a future I won't experience? You start to notice how much energy everyone around you spends on permanence projects, building empires, establishing names, creating monuments. And you can see the fear driving it, the absolute terror of being forgotten. And you feel compassion for them, but you also can't participate anymore. Because once you've truly known death, you understand you're already forgotten. In 100 years, 200, 1,000, you'll be as forgotten as if you never existed. That's not a tragedy. That's just what death is. You might still create things, but you're no longer trying to cheat death with them. You're just alive, creating. And when it ends, it ends. Once you see that permanence is impossible, you can't unsee it. The drive to defeat death through legacy dissolves. What remains is just the strange temporary fact of being here now. The third thing you lose, and this one is particularly destabilizing, is the belief that you can control what happens. Before you know death, you live inside an elaborate system of control mechanisms. You eat well and exercise to control your health. You save money to control your future. You plan, schedule, organize, optimize. You have routines and systems and strategies. You read books about productivity and time management and goal achievement. You believe functionally that if you do the right things in the right order, you can determine outcomes. Yes, bad things happen to other people, accidents, illnesses, catastrophes, but those are failures of control. If you're careful enough, smart enough, prepared enough, you can avoid them. You have insurance policies for everything. Backup plans, emergency funds. You lock doors, wear seat belts, check expiration dates, maintain equipment. You try to eat organic, avoid toxins, reduce stress. You're building a fortress of control, and inside that fortress you feel relatively safe. Anxious, certainly, because maintaining the fortress is exhausting but safe. But once you know death, the fortress reveals itself as paper. You realize that control is mostly an illusion we maintain to keep functioning. And here's the thing about control. The more you actually look at how things happen, the less control you find anyway. I remember when this fully hit me. My friend's daughter, healthy, athletic, 22 years old, had a brain aneurysm while jogging, just dropped dead on a Tuesday morning. No warning, no risk factors, no family history. She did everything right, ate well, didn't smoke, exercised regularly. Oh, and her brain just exploded. 1 minute alive, next minute dead. I sat with my friend at the hospital and I watched him trying to find the control point. What did she eat? Had she been stressed? Was there something we missed? Anything that, if different, would have changed the outcome? But there wasn't anything. It just happened. Like rain. Like earthquakes. Like every other thing that happens in a universe that doesn't consult our preferences. And I realized this is true for everything. All of it. Every outcome is the result of forces so complex, so interwoven, so dependent on factors you don't even know exist, that your control is basically you pressing buttons on a disconnected toy steering wheel while the actual vehicle drives itself. You can't control whether you get cancer. Can't control whether someone runs a red light and hits you. Can't control whether the economy collapses, or whether your partner falls out of love, or whether your child develops a mental illness, or whether a virus sweeps the world. You can influence probabilities slightly, maybe. But control, actual control? No. I don't say this with any sense of superiority, mind you. I still make plans, I still take precautions, but I know what they are now: rituals to manage anxiety, not actual power over outcomes. This realization creates a strange kind of freedom, but also profound alienation. Because everyone around you is still maintaining their fortresses, still obsessing over optimization, still believing that if they just do enough research, make enough preparations, accumulate enough resources, they can prevent disaster. And you can't tell them it doesn't work that way, because they need to believe it does. The alternative is too terrifying. So you watch people exhaust themselves with control strategies. You watch them agonize over decisions as if the right choice guarantees good outcome. You watch them blame themselves when bad things happen, because blame preserves the illusion of control. Better to have failed at controlling than to admit there was nothing to control. And you feel compassion, but also distance, because you've left that world. You're living in a different universe now, one where most things just happen, and you respond and that's it. You become strangely calm about things that used to terrify you. Not because you're brave, but because you've accepted that terror doesn't prevent anything. You might still feel fear, but you're no longer organizing your entire life around avoiding worst-case scenarios. Because you know the worst case will eventually happen anyway. You'll die. Everyone you love will die. All your efforts to prevent it will fail. So why spend your living moments in the anxiety of pretend control? Once you see that control is mostly illusion, you can't unsee it. The fortress dissolves. What remains is just you alive in a universe that doesn't require your permission to do anything. The fourth thing you lose, and this might be the most existentially disorienting, is the importance of your personal story. Before you know death, you're the protagonist of a story. Your story, it has a beginning. Your birth, your childhood, your formative experiences. It has a developing plot. The challenges you've overcome, the relationships you've built, the person you've become. And it has an implicit promise that this story is going somewhere, that all these experiences are building towards something, that your struggles mean something because they're chapters in a narrative that will ultimately make sense. You tell this story to yourself constantly. In therapy, in journals, in conversations with friends. You're always narrating, I'm the kind of person who, or given what I've been through, or my journey has taught me. You identify with your traumas, your achievements, your transformations. You're building a coherent identity from the raw material of experience. And this story feels important. It feels like the most important thing, actually, because it's who you are. You might spend years in therapy excavating this story, understanding how your childhood shaped your attachment style, how your parents' divorce created your fear of abandonment, how that one teacher's comment created your perfectionism. You're building a comprehensive explanation for why you are the way you are. And there's real value in this. I'm not suggesting otherwise. Understanding patterns helps. But beneath the therapeutic work is an assumption that your story matters in some absolute sense. But once you know death, once you've really internalized that you will completely cease to exist, something very strange happens to your story. It doesn't exactly disappear, but it stops feeling important. And here's the thing about your personal narrative. It only matters to you, and only for as long as you exist. When you die, your story ends. Not in the sense that it concludes with some meaningful resolution, but in the sense that it just stops. Like a sentence that. But here's the extraordinary thing that happens when you lose your belief in unlimited time, and your need for permanence, and your illusion of control, and the importance of your personal story. You become alive in a way you've never been before. Let me be precise about this. You lose the ability to postpone experience, to chase legacy, to pretend you're steering the ship, and to hide inside your narrative. You lose all these mechanisms for avoiding the actual present moment. And what you discover, if you can bear it, and most people can't, is that the present moment is the only place where being alive actually happens. This isn't about mindfulness in the way it's usually sold. This isn't about feeling peaceful or centered or calm. It's much stranger than that. It's about finding a tragic way, in a way that makes you wonder how you went so long not seeing what was right in front of you. The coffee tastes different when you know you'll drink your last cup someday. The conversation with your child feels different when you know there will be a last conversation. The morning light through the window, the weight of your body in a chair, the sound of rain, the face of someone you love. All of it becomes somehow more real when you stop trying to make it permanent or controllable or meaningful in some grand narrative sense. This is what freedom actually is. Not the freedom to do whatever you want. Not the freedom from consequences or pain or loss. But the freedom from living in the prison of pretending death isn't real. That freedom feels like what it is. Terrifying and exhilarating and utterly uninsurable. So yes, knowing death involves loss. Tremendous loss. You lose your functional belief in unlimited time, your need for permanence, your illusion of control, your identity as the protagonist of an important story. You lose things that seemed absolutely essential, things that felt like they made life worth living, things everyone around you is still clinging to. But what you discover, if you can bear it, and I want to be honest that not everyone can or should have to, is that what you really are isn't any of those things. You were never your time management system. You were never your legacy projects. You were never your control strategies. You were never your story. Those were just costumes you wore, masks you held up, games you played to avoid knowing what you always already knew. You're the thing that's here right now, reading these words, breathing, being aware. That's it. That's what you've always been. And it's temporary, completely, utterly temporary. And that's not a problem to solve. That's just what this is. The only thing worth having, the only thing you can actually have is this moment's experience. Not what you'll make of it, not what it means, not what story it fits into. Just the strange, irreplaceable fact of being conscious right now. That's the only thing that's not a fiction. And you can have it completely, but only if you know it's already ending. Once you see this, you can't unsee it. You become someone who knows death, and you can't go back to being someone who doesn't. The person who cared about oat milk versus almond milk is gone. And what remains is just this, the mysterious temporary fact of being alive, happening once and then not happening anymore. That's it. That's what you can't unsee.